The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. The FTSE closes at a record high today as the city bets on more rate cuts by the Bank of England this year. TikTok will be banned in the United States from Sunday following a ruling from the Supreme Court. Plus,
Extinction is a thing of the past.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
are we looking at a real-life Jurassic Park, turning science fiction into fact? We'll be speaking to the company aiming to bring back extinct animals to help the future of the planet. You want to miss that a little bit later. Very good afternoon, though, and welcome to Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. We're going to start this afternoon, though, with the fact that the FTSE 100, which has hit a record high today at the end of a very busy week of, frankly, mixed messages on the economy. Investors have been buying up shares in the UK's biggest companies because of the weak pound and now betting on the fact that the Bank of England are more likely to cut interest rates more than once this year. So this is how the FTSE ended, beating its previous record, as I said, in May of last year at 8505, up 1.36%. Sterling, however, as I said, is down again today, 122 against the dollar, 118 against the euro. It comes as the IMF has predicted economic growth in the UK is set to accelerate this year. They say that GDP is on track to grow by 1.6% in 2025. Well, earlier there was some less good news from the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, revealing that retail sales fell by 0.3% month-on-month in December. Now, that was mainly because of food sales, which were down 1.9%. Well, let's try and make sense of all of that. Let's speak to Rob Wood, Chief UK Economist at Pantheon Microeconomics. Very good afternoon to you, Rob. I don't know where to start. Real mixed messages this week in terms of the UK economy. But let's start with the FTSE 100, a record high. What has driven that?
So the FTSE has been driven up by falling sterling, which has been going down for most of this month already as the dollar surges. Also higher oil prices, they're up the best part of 10% over the past couple of weeks, and the FTSE is heavily dominated by miners and companies that earn a lot of their revenue in dollars. So the FTSE 100 isn't really a statement about the UK economy. It's a statement about large firms which earn a lot of revenue in dollars, which is now worth a lot more because the pound has fallen.
Yeah, as you say, it's not a reflection of the UK economy because, frankly, the indicators thus far this year have not been great. But the IMF this afternoon suggesting that actually we will see quite a bit of growth. Well, modest growth in many ways, but still growth, if you like.
That's right. The IMF have pushed up their forecast for growth next year very fractionally, up to 1.6%, up from a downwardly revised 0.9 in 2024. So they're actually looking for slightly weaker growth over the 2 years as a whole, but certainly more acceleration. That matches my view, which is the UK economy is likely to improve from this poor performance in the second half of last year. Business sentiment was hit pretty hard by the new government's tax hikes and the run-up to that, along with Donald Trump's election and tariff threats, which particularly hit UK manufacturing and have led to fears of inflation. But heading into the new year, those tax hikes will bed in. The government will start spending the money, which should offset some of the drag from hikes. And look, consumers, notwithstanding weak retail sales in December, they've actually been spending through last year. Consumer spending growth rose an average of 0.5% a quarter through 2024. Households are finally starting to cut back their saving, and that should help growth this year as well.
And Rob, are we now looking potentially at more than one interest rate cut this year? We seem to be ebbing and flowing on this. What's your thoughts?
I think we are. I'm looking for 3 cuts, but honestly, it's a pretty close call between 2 and 3. You can see from the weak performance of the economy in the second half of last year that the Bank of England can continue cutting interest rates. But inflation is heading up. It's going to go up to around 3.3% in April and stay there for much of the year. So the Bank of England does also have to be cautious. It needs to return inflation to a 2% target. So it has to navigate this sort of middle ground, supporting the economy, not letting growth be too weak. But it needs to bring inflation back down to the target, which means it can't go absolutely gangbusters on supporting the economy. 2 to 3 rate cuts, I think, is what we can look forward to. February will definitely see one. Now we will see a quarter point reduction from the committee early next month.
And in many ways, that is to kind of kickstart a bit of growth potentially. That could be helpful, couldn't it? Rob, bottom line is, final question. You seem relatively positive about the UK's outlook this year.
Certainly, I think, look, we've got decent real income growth. GDP growth will improve up to 1.5%. I mean, historically, this is not a strong growth rate for the UK. We used to grow at 2.5% a year prior to the financial crisis, even a little bit faster before COVID. So these long-term economic problems that the government is facing and that's restricting its ability to spend money on public services, these remain. But we should definitely see a pickup from what we've seen in 2023 and 2024. And 2024, when the economy was heavily restricted by sky-high energy prices, by panic about interest rates as well. All of those are fading. So that should help growth improve.
OK. Rob, really appreciate your analysis this afternoon on a day in which, I suppose, you could say history was kind of made with the FTSE closing at a record high. Rob Wood there. Let's bring you some breaking news this afternoon, and that is from the United States, where the Supreme Court has upheld a ban on TikTok that comes into place from Sunday. If it's not sold by its Chinese parent company, the incoming president, Donald Trump, has just said he will make a decision on TikTok in the not-too-distant future. Well, let's speak to Sal Della Monica from New York, Chief Marketing Officer at Everywhere, part of the Mike Worldwide PR agency. Very good afternoon to you. Just talk us through what has happened at the Supreme Court this afternoon.
Good afternoon, or it's still good morning for me. Nice to be with you, Darren. So the option to not uphold the case that TikTok brought, which was essentially asking under First Amendment jurisdiction. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but essentially means that on the 19th, the ban will makes TikTok not supported by internet companies, so they're not going to be available to update the app. And those are the companies, Apple, Google, think your app stores, the ones that will be held liable for hosting it.
And just explain this to me, because we ended up in a situation where this obviously went through Congress, but subsequently, and I think we've just heard from the White House this afternoon, the current president, President Biden, isn't kind of now in favour of this. The incoming president, Trump, isn't in favour of this. Who is?
Well, it's unclear whether or not Trump actually is in favor of it. If you remember his first administration, he was pro a ban, which was a move on China. But based on his comments today, the assumption is that he's going to try to work out a deal. And I think our point of view generally is that he will try to find or force some deal. It is unclear what he can do through executive order, for example. It really comes up to whether or not the Justice Department will decide to uphold the ban and how they choose to sort of prosecute the companies that don't abide by it.
Isn't that the point, that actually, even though it could be officially banned, that the feds, if you like, decide not to really enforce it?
Correct, and that's the unclear part. I think that's what we'll come to see sort of in the coming weeks. What you're seeing now is, hosts of senators that were either pro the law originally or now somewhat against it, or trying to find an extension opportunity. So it's still sort of up in the air. It's nice that they're trying to figure out what to do next, but it's still uncertain how they move forward.
You know what? If this does happen, though, it is clearly a big blow to TikTok, isn't it? I think 170 million users in the United States, and it's become an app that many ordinary Americans use, but also I think Donald Trump's got 15 million followers, influential Americans too.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's become the go-to platform. You mentioned sort of 170 million Americans on it. A lot of them skew younger, so it's become a platform for sort of a Gen Z audience, a much younger audience, and they make up about 45% of them. And you're seeing sort of, their response to a lot of this is to identify sort of, other apps for them to be on. So you've probably heard a lot about Red Note and Lemonade, both which are Chinese-based apps. So it feels more like a protest vote than anything else. But yeah, I think the economy sort of that TikTok upholds. I think they did a study in 2023 that said, they contributed something along the lines of 24.2 billion, give or take, to the U.S. GDP. And this past Black Friday, a lot of creators through the TikTok shop sold a lot of product. I think this year, somewhere along the lines of about 100 million in commerce. So there's an economic impact here, but then there's also the impact, to your point, on sort of general consumers. But what we look at is the impact on creators, influencers, and brands that have really committed a lot of time and space to TikTok.
Okay. Saldella Monica from New York there. Thank you very much. And we will watch to see what happens over the weekend when it comes to TikTok. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darren.
Now, let's move on to something entirely different, because when you think about bringing back extinct species from the dead, you probably think of this.
Extinction is a thing of the past.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
What a great film. Well, Jurassic Park itself may be fiction, of course, but there is a company based in the United States that's hoping to bring back the woolly mammoth from extinction by the end of this decade. Colossal has just raised some $200 million to fund its work to rebuild extinct species, which it says will help secure the health and biodiversity of the planet's future. As well as working on bringing back the woolly mammoth and the dodo, it's also working to save animals such as the white rhino, which remain perilously close to extinction. Well, earlier I spoke to its chief executive, Ben Lamb.
Colossal is the world's first de-extinction and species preservation company, right? And so at the end of the day, it's a systems model. So you actually have to innovate across computational biology, genetic engineering, embryology, animal husbandry. We even have an artificial womb team. And so you have to have the latest and greatest technologies, but you also have to have the best and brightest team. And so that requires a pretty massive team, plus about 17 academic partners all around the world and about 40 postdocs in those individual academic partners. So with that, it's quite a lot of people that have to come together to make this dream a reality. And so the capital is just to continue to push that dream forward while we build technologies both for de-extinction and to save critically endangered species.
Well, I was going to say, give us a bit more details about what this dream is, because I read that you've been dubbed the real-life Jurassic Park, but I also believe we're not talking about dinosaurs here.
Yeah, so we're not working on dinosaurs. We do get that comparison quite a lot. I can't remember the last time I walked on stage where someone didn't play that music and didn't ask about dinosaurs. I think that's the #1 question we get asked is about dinosaurs. But fundamentally, we're up against a massive extinction crisis. The world's forecasted to lose up to 50% of all biodiversity between now and 2050. And conservation works. It just doesn't work at the speed at which we are eradicating species and changing the planet, right? And so our vision is if we could go build this de-extinction company to bring back these iconic mega species, inspire kids in the next generation about science, and then use some of those tools and technologies and make it freely available to conservationists so they have new tools in the fight against loss of biodiversity. That's our dream. And so far we've made a lot of progress on the mammoth, thylacine, and dodo.
So Ben, is your argument, and I can see a dodo and a book there, and I think a woolly mammoth.
I get given a lot of stuff. I actually got a Jurassic Park thing that given to me.
They're not real, just in case people are concerned at home are concerned. Just on that, so you're arguing, your big point is that in order to save some of the species we have right now, we need to bring back some of those species that have already become extinct.
Yeah, so my argument is that, it's better to have a de-extinction toolkit and not need it than need a de-extinction toolkit and not have it. And at the rate of which we're losing species, we need new tools and technology. So we need advanced genetic rescue. We need advanced biobanking and biovaults. We need advanced genetic, being able to engineer in genetic diversity. So like one of the projects we work on is the northern white rhino, which is an incredible project led by Dr. Thomas Hildebrand. But there's 2 remaining females. They have 18 embryos. They're functionally extinct. But we actually need to go to frozen zoos and museums and others and collect DNA from northern white rhinos that have been dead for 100+ years and be able to analyze that DNA, rebuild that DNA, and engineer it into living cells so that we can engineer in genetic diversity. So that's just one small example, but that's where the de-extinction, if we can do it for a mammoth and do it for a dodo, then we can save a lot of these other megafauna.
Just because you do want to bring back the dodo and you do want to bring back.
Oh, absolutely. So we're not just saving species, we're also working on de-extinction. And de-extinction gives us these like moonshot projects that force us to innovate. It's much harder to do ancient DNA assembly off 65 mammoth genomes ranging from 700,000 years than something that's only been dead for, a couple of years, and we have frozen preserved samples, right? And so it forces us to build technologies in a way that can be scaled for today.
What would you say, though, to those people who say this is interfering with biology? Like, we as beings on this planet have lived through lots of climatic events, lots of things that have wiped animals out, and some animals have done well, others have not. That's just biology. And what you're trying to do is trying to reverse some of that, and that's maybe not the morally right thing to do.
Well, I would argue it's the most moral thing to do because we actually eradicated these species. Anthropologic effects drove mammoths to extinction. The Australian government eradicated the thylacine by putting a bounty on its head and paying people to exterminate it. And the Dutch
isn't
the dodo.
Yeah, but if you view us as animals, which we are fundamentally, that's what animals have done to lots of species throughout history, even before Homo sapiens existed.
The difference is that we have a moral compass and we also have technologies. So we can actually look to say, how can we bring back species to reintroduce them in a way that actually help the ecosystem?
What's the timescale here? Are we talking about maybe a dodo or woolly mammoth by the end of this decade? And is a dinosaur definitely off the cards?
So that's the number one question we get. The three questions we all get is, are you sure you won't do a dinosaur? When are we getting what? And what's next? Everyone loves, we don't even have mammoths yet, but everyone wants to know what's next. And so, our goal that we've said publicly is that by 2028, by the end of 2028, we believe we'll have our first mammoth calves. We're in the editing phase. So we've done all the ancient DNA work. We've done all the comparative genomics work. We've identified our targets. We've established cell lines and we're editing. So we do feel very confident in that timeline.
Fascinating, isn't it, that we could have potentially a woolly mammoth back on the planet? They seem to think by the end of this decade. You're watching Business Live. Coming up next, though, very much back to today, and China's economy steams ahead. That's despite fears over looming Trump tariffs. We'll be talking about that next.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the nets?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank.
These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them. A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again.
This is the third or fourth time in the 18 months that their homes have gone under.
Sky News, the full story first.
It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering, designed to humour and to help us.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News. Get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back to Sky News. Just to bring you up to date with a developing story this afternoon, and that is that President-elect Trump, his inauguration, of course, big day on Monday, is likely actually, according to our colleagues at NBC, to be moved indoors. It, of course, normally takes place, doesn't it, outside the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Reports, as I say, from our colleagues in the US at NBC suggesting it could be moved inside the rotunda, inside the Capitol building itself, and that the parade may move also inside to Washington's Capital One sports arenas. So reports there, as I say, from our colleagues, that President Trump's inauguration ceremony could move inside. Why is it? Looking at my weather app, it's suggesting daytime temperatures in Washington on Monday could be -5 and nighttime temperatures as low as -13, so due to severe cold weather. We'll bring you more on that story at the top of the hour with Jonathan Samuels. Let's move on to China now, though, because it says its economy grew by 5% last year after the government brought in a raft of stimulus measures to help reverse the slowdown. But some are sceptical about the real level of growth, and it's clear that the economy does, of course, face serious challenges, not least of all those potential tariffs that President Trump could bring in from as early as next week. But let's speak to Ki Yu-jin, who is author of the New China Playbook, Beyond Socialism and Capitalism. Very good afternoon to you, Ki. Just let's start with what is going on here in terms of economic growth, because it does seem to have really surged in the back half of last year.
Well, first of all, it's against the background of a very strong stimulus package and quite robust export performance. I think the real question is hitting the target may be feasible, but really is where the growth is coming from. Is it stimulating more supply, which could lead to more excess capacity problems, or is it actually going to fundamentally solve the problem of weak demand? That's the key question.
But it does seem that, Chinese people are willing to spend money again. I see the housing market has stabilised a little bit. Consumer spending, particularly on household goods, it is up. I mean, this is a relatively good story, isn't it, for China?
Well, consumption growth is stabilized, but a lot of it is flight to quality. A lot of it is consumption downgrading. To really solve the fundamental problem of weak demand, you really have to think about the hundreds of millions of rural households who still lack social protection. So if they ask, how are the policies actually going to work, it has to start from social safety nets, access to health and education, and that actually has been lagging. So fundamentally, these structural reforms are necessary to be coupled with these stimulus packages advantages to really actually have an impact.
And KU, we obviously have to look ahead to President Trump and tariffs. I mean, that could change things this year, couldn't it?
Well, first of all, China has long been preparing for a return of tariffs, whether it's Trump or others. So this has actually set off a globalization frenzy. If you look at the export performance, it shows that China has seamlessly diverted their exports away from the U.S. to others. But of course, the tariffs will have a negative impact. And the most likely scenario is, rather than retaliation, a stronger fiscal stimulus on the Chinese side.
And just very finally, we did see a telephone conversation between President Trump and President Xi today. Just briefly, that's quite significant.
It means it's a start of a negotiation process. So room to talk about, what both sides can do.
OK, Qiyu, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon on the Chinese economy rebounding at the back end of next year.
Great to be with you, Darren.
Thank you. OK, well, that is it from me on Business Live for this week. Of course, we're back on Monday at... Oh, we're not, actually, because of the inauguration. Actually, we're back on Tuesday at 11:30. Almost forgot that. Inauguration that seems like it'll be inside. Up next, it is the News Hour. Anna Botti live in Jerusalem with the very latest on that peace deal in the Middle East. And Jonathan Samuels has got the rest of your news on this Friday afternoon. But from me, for now, have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Goodbye.